kind of data you ought to go home and get pissed about, I think. This is, I hear something that we ought to spend more money. This is, the left axis is expenditures per pupil. I think we're up to 22 or 23,000 now. This is academic performance. I think those lines would be parallel. They're not. Maybe we should still spend, by the way, I'd be double the spender to solve the problem. You know, I got into this by asking the question, what are the root causes of homelessness? We're checking them all in Delaware. There is some out-of-the-box thinking. This is a chart I stole from my dad. Actually, he gave it to me there. But by the way, there's a lot of other data here. I didn't. Some charts I eliminated. Delaware was #1 in the nation in home foreclosures last year. Last month. Per capita. More people losing their homes. Who knew? There was an article about it in the News Journal on like page 7. But I think that's not a good thing. I know there's a lot of anger in the world, and we see protests on No Kings, but they got to talk about No Kings because Delaware's not a great story. There are some the book is not obvious. I'm tying this back to a book, but I promise. There's some non-obvious things in when Dad took over as governor in '76. Delaware income tax was 19%. Imagine 19% income tax. He lowered it to what eventually became, 6 and some change today at the high end. During that period, income tax revenue, this scale, went from $200 million to $800 million. Kind of non-obvious that you reduce taxes and raise revenue. One of the problems I have with politicians broadly on both political parties is they play zone defense, not zone offense. They're not looking down the path saying, here are 10 things we can go do to achieve some great things. No, they just are fixing problems as they see them occur here and there. Dad used to he died a few years back, and so one of the pieces of wisdom I think he imparted to a lot of people, Thayer and I in particular, which is be a pie baker, not a pie slicer. And I see politicians today, Delaware today, we are masters of pie slicing. And pie slicing is a very self-serving discussion for politicians. You know, come visit me, bend the knee, and maybe I'll give your group a little extra cut here or a little more subsidy there. Where's the conversation about raising the pie? You know, Dad brought a whole industry to Delaware. I don't know if people remember that. Sam remembers it. You and I are old enough to remember that. 36,000 white-collar jobs within 18 months. 35 banks, I think. That was offensive thinking. That was, let's go find an industry, bring it here. We had no affinity with the credit card industry. Didn't know anything about it. We figured out a way to modify our laws, essentially a little bit of a tax cut to them. And we brought a whole industry here. And the reverberations of it are felt today. Delaware's largest employer is JPMorgan Chase. I have the New York Times clipping. It was a slide buried in the deck. I'm not going to go through it, but saying, in the New York Times, saying, we're going to bring 100 jobs to Delaware because that's what you needed to take part of this. You had to hire 100 Delawareans to be part of it. And now there are 11,000, 12,000, something like that in the state. That's the other thing that concerns me more broadly about Delaware, and we'll get on to other topics in a moment here, but if you look at the largest employers in the state, the 10 largest, you have to get down to number 4 before you get one that's not state controlled. So that's not a great environment to be in. I'm not happy with this, right? Here's what's crazy is Delaware state legislature passed a law that they're taking financial control over the hospitals. pay attention to that. I wrote a blistering op-ed page. Worst piece of legislation I've seen Delaware pass in my lifetime. When you control the budget of an organization, you control an organization. You want to run that experiment, I'll control your household budget. You tell me how much control I have. I have control over everything, you have control over the budget. The state of Delaware is taking financial approval and veto authority over hospital budgets. The same people that did this are now going to be responsible for your health care. Problem with all of this, it doesn't impact rich people, it impacts poor Delawareans. Anyway, I hope I pissed you off a little bit. I got lighter topics to talk about, I promise. But I want to get things started. I don't think people are thinking about this, and it's maybe a part of the problem with a one-party state is there's not somebody going, you know, there's some problems here. This is the start to my real talk. This is the cover of Forbes magazine in November of 2007. Nokia, 1 billion customers. Who can catch them? Anybody have a Nokia phone? I think Mom had one way back. It's a doorstop or something now. I bought a Nokia phone on eBay just to say I have a Nokia phone. You know, things are inevitable until they're not. And I think, folks, what got me into thinking about non-obvious thinking, first, it's a little bit the way I think. There knows me a little bit, and I'm not a very linear sort of person. It'll come out of the talk, I promise. But Nokia, a billion customers, who can catch them? Some small entrepreneurs. I was in Nokia's headquarters, actually, in Finland, the week iPhone was announced, and they kind of scoffed at it. Actually, I want to write another book to write. I was in Sears' headquarters, too, early on. And there was a common theme about, I was representing DuPont at the time in fiber sales, Cordura and luggage and lycra and stuff. And both had both were very arrogant organizations and not curious. This is two pictures of the 1903 May Day parade in New York City. This is the 1913 May Day parade in New York City. Notice some things there? Of course, all horse and buggies on the left. In the decade, it went essentially all. But I'm told there is a horse and buggy. There's a car here, and I'm told there is one horse and buggy here. But that's a big change in New York City in a decade. And what was interesting to me were the secondary implications of that change. Think of all the businesses that put out of business and all the businesses that got into business. My favorite example is Michelin star restaurants. You know, Michelin star restaurants came from Michelin Tire. The idea is to get you to use your tires to go visit the cool restaurant in the next town over. People didn't think that way when they had horses. And they wanted to get you and your family together and wear down Michelin tires so you got some more tires. Pretty clever, non-obvious sort of thinking, some secondary implications to this. What interests me, and I'm an investment entrepreneur, I invest in entrepreneurs. We looked at 1,700 things last year and invested in 4. But I always like to ask the question, what's the customer's ROI for using something? So we know what Ford's ROI is, pretty good. Make a car, we buy cars. But what's your family's ROI on having a car? Pretty damn high, right? I mean, we all make the decision if you can afford a car, you're finding a way to get access to a car. These are two interesting gentlemen. The guy on the right, I want to get his name right. The guy on the right invented the weaving machine in Edmund Cartwright, the loom in 1785. A loom could do the loom could do what 10, principally in those days, women were doing, weaving. And it was a 10xer for weaving. He took it to the Queen of England at the time, who passed out, patents weren't applied for back then, they were just given to the Queen. The Queen said, you have the exclusive license to this. And she looked at his machine and said, NFW, we're not doing this. It's going to put a whole bunch of people out of business. He then went to Germany, got the same reaction. It wasn't until he went to France where they said, sure, set up shop. And it's maybe why the word entrepreneur is of French origin. But imagine a government that's so oppressive that says, you've got an innovation here, a cure for cancer or a weaving machine or something, and we're going to prevent you from commercializing it. The guy on the left is my favorite. He's a young mechanical engineer, hired by the printing presses in New York City to control the humidity. The problem printing presses had in New York City is about 100 years ago, in the actually it was late 1800s, the humidity would change the print. Colors would bleed, and so we said, how do we control the bleeding of colors? You'll recognize him because his last name is Carrier. He came up with Carrier air conditioning. Now think of the ROI of Carrier air conditioning. What's the real estate value he unlocked in Atlanta, Georgia in the summer? Or Houston, Texas in the summer? Now Carrier went on to make a lot of money, good for him. Went on to build a great business, and his investors made money, good for them. But changed some lives and changed certainly the landscape of the world. A lot more examples of these sort of things. And that's the neat thing. Capitalism gets a bad name today, but nobody thinks about the secondary implications of capitalism. What's the real estate the value he unlocked is of course the answer to that question. This is my favorite chart. Matter of fact, almost every time I have dinner, I whip this chart out and show somebody if they haven't seen it before. This is from an MIT economist named McAfee. And this is a list of two kinds of companies that fit two characteristics. They are less than 50 years old. By the way, I had lunch with him in a few weeks. I'm so excited. I got 10 other charts I think I need to self-produce. This is a list of companies that are less than 50 years old and more than 10 billion market cap. So it's essentially an economy's recent success stories. That's the EU. EU is 150 million more people than the United States. If you add the EU's success stories together, they fit in the market cap of Costco. That's it. The president of Germany looked at this chart, this exact chart, and said, we weren't beaten by the Chinese or the Russians. We were beaten by forms and procedures and regulations. If you're an entrepreneur in Europe or anywhere, and you look at these two data points, where do you want to be an entrepreneur? If you're an investor, where do you want to invest? I mean, Napoleon said our army marches on its stomach. I gave a talk similar to this with some friends in the U.S. military, and our army marches on this. And it's not just I showed this to the kids at Leadership Delaware, and it was the first question I got. Are you familiar with Leadership Delaware? Yeah. It's a great organization. The first thing I got was, that's billionaires, and that's problematic. Okay. There are bad billionaires. Yeah, I'm sure there are. There are bad people in every profession. By the way, in Delaware's history, I think we've had 3 by my count, and maybe I'm biased, but anybody here gone into Moore's Hospital or had a friend go to the Moore's Hospital? That guy left 95% of his assets to benefit that kid. That was a good billionaire. T. Coleman DuPont built a highway. Actually, the legislature fought for 3 years to prevent him from building this highway. Can't imagine this. He built it with his own money, bought the land, paid for the highway, I want to build it was one of the first limited access highways in the country. I think it's exactly what it is. I want to build a monument 100 miles high and lay it down on the state of Delaware. And, 2 years after, it was a year after it was built, the legislature voted to expand it. And of course, we know it is the Pont Highway, Route 13. And the other, my favorite, the Longwood Foundation. Anybody seen the lights at Longwood Gardens? The largest philanthropic organization in the state by an order of magnitude. My brother runs it. Gives away $50 million a year, $60 million a year. By the way, if you want to tear up, go to the community education building. You haven't done, you should have one of these. I know you have a long affiliation with this, but you should have a tour of that. That's unbelievable. I mean, I can't go in there. It gets you. It gets you. But that's the kind of innovation that private sector can do, and government is woefully inadequate. I mean, actually, I looked at this data, which is you can calculate productivity data in every profession. How much more efficient are plumbers? Everybody has an upward slope. How much more efficient are lawyers? With computers, can they process more data? I mean, every accountants, Excel. How much does that help accountants? Government. What's the change in the process for getting a park pass or a fishing license in Delaware? Has it changed in 100 years? I looked it up. Has not. What do you think? I mean, there's just no incentive to innovate in government. They don't do it. And what pisses me off, sorry, I'll get off my government thing, but I get pissed at it. They want to take money out of this and put it in things that don't improve. Now, government does good things and we need it. I'm not anti-government. This is an interesting chart. Leadership Delaware, the first reaction was a lot of billionaires, and that's problematic. And maybe so. But how many good jobs came out of this? How much tax revenue comes out of this? How much great tech? By the way, everybody in this room probably uses half of these companies every day. You don't know it, but you're using their tech. How many charitable foundations with missions like curing cancer and homelessness came out, you pick your company, came out of any one of these? I bet Amazon has 1,000 charitable foundations that came over people that owned Amazon stock and got wealthy and want to do good for the world. It's a pretty good thing. So lots of benefit. The question I have that we should be asking, I think, is why? Why is the U.S. so good at this? And it's survived political cycles. I think this is a precious thing. Delaware, by my count, maybe has one company, maybe Insight qualifies as less than 50 years old, more than 10 billion market cap. I can't think of another. There's some privately held ones, maybe CSC is close, I don't know. But we should have several on here. So I had a fun time when I funded some research on how people come up with non-obvious ideas, and what lots been written on the benefit of non-obvious ideas. Those are some of the first slides I show here. Why a little creative thinking, carrier air conditioning, Henry Ford and the automobile. But very little has been written about how to come up with non-obvious ideas. And that's what I had fun writing a book about, is because you think about it, if you're an entrepreneur or you're working on non-obvious, that's what entrepreneurs do, is they look for things that no one else sees. Investors, the same thing. That's why there's this thing called a stock tip. No one else sees this, but this is a really good thing. I think even politicians see a little bit of it, right? I mean, you get elected to office by tapping into the world in a way that no one else sees. So what is the process, and what is kind of a non-obvious idea? And sometimes, we sometimes think of them as just weird initially. If I had a better title for our book, it was How to Be Contrarian and Right, but the publisher didn't like that. So non-consensus, true, and useful were the kind of elements that we came up with. Who knew that Evian water was naive spelled backwards? One of the ways that I encourage non-obvious thinking in our firm is to kind of flip assumptions on things. And what if your basic assumptions are wrong? What happens? You think of this great book written about black swans. If you haven't read it, I encourage it. I'm trying to remember the author's name, but We have flocks of black swans. We have so much going on and so many disruptors in this country. COVID was a black swan. Ukraine was a black swan. The election of Donald Trump was a black swan. Lots of things were black swans. So we started, and the impetus is I used to host dinners, and I still do host dinners in Delaware, and some other people have, I would gather a group, and I've hosted them all around the United States, on Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, in Cincinnati with my friends at Procter & Gamble, and I ask, we get about 100 people in a room. You might think of it as, Jay, I'd work with you on that if you wanted to do that. But you ask everyone to come with an idea on how the world could change that's not obvious. And I love it. Actually, the smarter people are, the harder the time they have to come up with this. I've had Nobel Prize winners call me in a panic the night before, going, I can't think of anything non-obvious. I'm like, holy shit. What do you mean? I mean, and my, talk to a high school kid, because they're not encumbered with the shit the rest of us are encumbered by. But we've had some, so we would have these dinners. We'd ask everyone to speak for 2 minutes at their table on how the world could change. And then the table would vote on the most interesting idea and then present that to the room afterwards. And it was an interesting format. We'd catalog the whole thing. Everyone would get a PDF of all 100 plus ideas. And we had some really fascinating ideas come out of this. And we've hosted maybe 30 dinners in 20 years. And a woman won her table the other day saying science would prove God exists. God, I mean, it never occurred to me that that could be done, but wow, and maybe it can. One of the most famous venture capitalists in the country, Josh Koppelman, I think I have a high regard for Josh in Philadelphia, who said digital exhaust is going to cure cancer. My first question is, what the frick is digital exhaust? I went into a long explanation of that, but the answer is your phone knows a lot about you, a lot more than you think. And it knows how fast you walk, it knows what your prescriptions are, it knows how frequently you buy tomatoes, it knows lots of stuff. And the question is, if you started breaking those silos and looking for patterns in that data, you might be able to say, geez, you might find some interesting cures, which is interesting. One of the other ideas that came out of it was the cheap will acquire the expensive. Companies that can make $300 refrigerators and $2,000 automobiles are going to rule the world. Tata Motors, if you remember, acquired Jaguar, not the other way around. Lots of fascinating ideas. I'm happy to go down sensitive time, a little bit on time. I maybe got a few minutes for Q&A. I've got a whole bunch more provocative, interesting charts. These are some of the acronyms. We talked about creating space, providing unique insight, focusing on what the root challenges were. This is outlined in our book. Yeah. So anyway, let me stop there and take questions. Thank you very much for. Oh, Sam, yeah. You gave me your question in advance, and I still don't have an answer for it. Go ahead.
That's all right. Thank you. Great job this morning. By the way, you and Claire have come a long way since we met 50 years ago.
We're both heavier.
The up by the bootstrap story. Anyway, what you talked about this morning in terms of entrepreneurship really is based in part on political climate. And without getting into the tribalism that separates America today, but looking back at what we saw with your father and so on, and there, as one of the older guys in the room, there are a lot of people who won't remember the term Rockefeller Republican. The Rockefeller Republican back in the day, the 70s and the 80s, named after Nelson Rockefeller, was a Republican who was a fiscal conservative, but who had a heart, who works in the kind of work that Claire is doing at the foundations and all of that. And as someone who, and I got to know you guys as teenagers when I was at your house with your dad, when I was covering his campaign as a young reporter in 1976, 50 years ago this summer. but your dad was a Rockefeller Republican. Notably, today, actually in the Philadelphia Inquirer this morning, there's a story about the death of Senator Hines 35 years ago this weekend. And Senator Hines arguably was one of the last of the Rockefeller Republicans. A phrase we heard in the 80s was compassionate conservative. I guess the question I really wanted to pose, Ben, is when you look at that, when we move past the era that we're in, what is the future and the prospect for this compassionate conservatism, for a fiscal side that has a libertarian side, but also has that Rockefeller Republican heart?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, one of the things Dad always used to tell me there too, I think is that people tend to think of politics a little bit like sports, in that there is a definite winner and a definite loser, but there's always another match, right? And I guess the thing in politics is, love or hate who's in office, there's another match. The person there will be gone in 2.5 years. I don't know. I hope I consider myself a moderate Republican, but a little bit of a libertarian like you. I'm skeptical of government, by the way. When you think about the very few precious tasks we give government in Delaware is education, and how badly we're failing at it. So I'm skeptical of government because I don't think it generally. I mean, there are a lot of exceptions, and it does good things, but. So I don't know what the right answer. I mean, I don't know how to answer your question. But maybe Thayer can answer your question. another question over here. Yes, go see.
Hi, yes. Good morning, Daniel Harris. Was the director for the Eastern United States Executive for Walmart for community engagement, also the corporate change agent as well too. First, thank you, Ben, for everything that you've done to the community, and each and every Rotarian that's sitting there as well too, because we have the ability to be a positive impact within every community that we have the ability to represent. Now, ultimately, becoming the next vice president of the United States, I mean, you're a subject matter expert in it. How do we look at it from a root cause analysis to make sure that we get global stability back for America? When you're looking at 194, there's 195 sovereign countries. 194 now turning their lens against America because we have so many instabilities. But then looking at it from an entrepreneurial way where there's small, medium, and large businesses. So small businesses innovate, medium businesses provide, and corporations scale. So making sure that we give every community the opportunity to be successful while still looking at the infrastructure built within our own society, because we have like farmers that are becoming a lot of times the suicide rates, so we know where they are, and then growing that from that perception.
I'm trying to think how to answer that question. Yes, the U.S. probably has lost some stature, but I'm not that worried about it. In part because of this. I mean, and it's maybe my answer is a rude, or no, that's not the right word. A brute force answer. But the fact is, we're half the world's market cap, and like the 60% of the world's market cap. I mean, it's the rest of the world needs us. Political memories are short. I mean, every president is. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Joe Biden saying some pretty damning things that would get people canceled today. We've all heard those things. He survived politically just fine, and the country is, again, love him or hate who's in office, we're going to have a new administration, and you got a chance to voice your concerns, and America will make a pick. I guess that's a weak answer to your question. I'm sorry. I wish I was more concise. Yes.
Real correctly, what would be Delaware's biggest threat? And if he enters education, you got maybe number 2 as well.
Okay.
Right. What's our biggest challenge? What's going to happen next? What's the threat that we must face?
Well, I'm really nervous we're going to lose our corporate franchise. That scares the crap out of me. I didn't get comfort when Governor Meyer fired Mike Hogan. I don't know if you saw that a little bit. Some of you probably know Mike. And he was just asking questions for data that's almost always there, I think always there, which is how are the new incorporations doing? I mean, that's the top of our funnel, right? Is young, are people still filing in Delaware? And by the way, why that matters? That's a third of our state budget. 1/3 of our state budget. We lose that. I mean, we have essentially red state taxes with blue state spending. And we get that because we have this, we extract through here. When I go to speak in other states, I always start out by thanking them. Because I speak to other entrepreneurs and investors, and they all have hundreds of Delaware corporations. I mean, thank you. There's streets and schools that should be named after you. I mean, you're supporting it. So, yeah, we cannot lose that. And we're in deep, the governor that loses that should move to another state. I also think if you were evil, I don't think anybody's evil for that matter. I don't think any Dover's evil. But suppose for a moment you were evil. What would you do to hurt a state? You'd really mess up the education system, and you'd trap people in it. You'd remove jobs, you'd make it tax. By the way, there's a relationship, but we all get good old minimum wage is great. You price low-skilled workers and low-skilled workers with criminal records out of their labor force. What do? They government subsidy and homeless. I mean, so we're doing a lot of the things, if you were evil, that you do. I mean, we need to be attracting whole new industries to this state. Look at what some of you remember MB&A? Charlie Colley, I was there when we gave him his retirement dinner. I was in the room. He gave millions to every charity in the state. I mean, it was a stunning thing. Anyway, those are the two answers to your question. We cannot lose the corporate franchise, and certainly, yeah.
And then, Cindy, I'd like to comment on your LinkedIn. I like the whole thing you're talking about. And you made me comfortable to speak up my mind as well.
Please.
I was raised and born in the communist China. So I know how damaging, how evil communism can bring to a state. Okay, so I'm very worried to see Delaware. I'm living here for the past 30 years. I'm very worried about the direction Delaware is going. We're one state, a one-party state. There's no debate when the legislation is passed. Last year I joined a LEAD program. People encouraged me to see if I can be a politician, in the future. I joined that program.
I'll vote for you.
I was asked to analyze some bills that was passed in our state. And some of the bills was passed, raising the NDAMRAC, license fees for a permit and all that, like 8 times, and without any debate, without any media coverage. I was shocked. This is our state. Look at the seats in our state. And just like majority control by one party. I don't care which one party. But once a state is controlled by one party, it's going to be a huge problem for any place.
I think you're right.
So, and also the example you gave about the pie, right? The pie about,
pie baking
versus pie size. Instead of divide the pie and compete for each piece, this book, I was just giving Lynn this book, I'll give you one book as well. Skills to Order, just published by Young Yakalik, and it became the New York Times bestseller within a week. So it talks about the communism enabled China to be the organ harvesting industry, $1 billion of industry to harvest people's organs to support transplantation. So he gave an example about the pie as well. About communism encouraging what's called zero sum. Like, the rich has to compete with the poor to earn this pie. The poor has to compete with the rich to earn this pie. But no, can we increase the pie? Right, so I've been working with Amazon for the past 5 years and commuting to DC for my job. I was wondering, why can't we bring the job to Delaware? And money cannot give you anything. The government is insane to increase the money to fund our education. It's not the case. The Amazon's best service was developed by a small team, very small team, and the team of 2 pieces, we call it 2 pieces, meaning that the team can eat 2 pieces that small. So the question is, how can we enable Delaware's entrepreneurship and media. Media has to be there. Free press has to be there. I hope you can run.
I love, you're totally, I'll vote for you for doubling your run. That's awesome. We need to be robust. We need to have dots on this chart in Delaware. We need to have companies growing and starting. There are a few signs of hope. The Mill has a company called Zip Whip Flip, which is a fascinating little asymmetric car startup. We looked at it and it came close to it. But so there are signs of hope, but I think you're right. We need to do a much better job of encouraging the growth of homegrown companies. That's a big deal. DuPont had a good run, 225 years, still around. I know it's, but it's a fraction of what it was. And so we, MB&A helped us for many years. Who's next? Other question, Charlie.
So thank you very much for your presentation. It's not a really great question to ask without the 1 minute left of time. But thinking about what's really consuming a lot of interest nowadays is the AI revolution. Yes. Would you like to prognosticate, speculate on the non-obvious consequences of AI revolution?
It's a good question. We think a lot about this, and we have a very refined thesis. Interestingly, when information became free 25 years ago, and if you compare it when knowledge and expertise are becoming free today. By the way, if you're not talking with your AI, you should be. You should be collaborating with them. It built into my Tesla just showed up an AI called Grok, and I drove 2 hours the other day. And I asked Grok, what's the root cause of homelessness? And my gosh, I had a 2-hour conversation with Grok. It produced a summary of the conversation. It was stunning. And it was like having a PhD student in my car who I could, yes, so we all want to be, one knowledge is we ought to be collaborating with it. My wife's observation is, she said, I wish the robots would come along so the robots could do the laundry and housework so I could do poetry and painting. And the robots, the AI came in and does painting and poetry so I could spend more time doing laundry and housework. This is not a good thing. When we were kids, I was promised flying cars and I got 140 characters in Twitter. I mean, that's a mismatch. I think there's, I'm nervous that bell is going to ring in a second, but I think there's a lot going on. And it's a bigger question to unpack. Maybe that's an interesting conversation because I think there are huge non-obvious implications to AI, and they're going to be fortunes. It's not all about making fortunes, but they're going to be societal problems solved. Back to your point, I'll close with one comment. I mean, there is so much less friction today between capital and ideas and markets. That's a good thing. If you wanted to start a company 50 years ago, you had to have rich parents. Those are the only people that started companies. Today, you don't need that at all, and you might even argue it's an impediment. There is, if you list the societal problems we have, you name it, cancer and all kinds of horrible diseases and all kinds of problems we don't even know we have. There are more smart people working on those things now than at any other time in history. So we have a lot of reasons to be optimistic. I think the future is bright, and with a parting comment I'll leave is, I finished the book Titan on John D. Rockefeller. It's a fascinating read. And I would argue that every middle-class person and most lower-class people in our country today live a better life than the richest man of all time. John D. Rockefeller. His healthcare was not as good as ours. His transportation was not as good as ours. His entertainment options were not as good as ours. There was, every aspect of his life. Never been on an airplane. Couldn't get, what percentage of your loved ones can you get a hold of in the next 5 minutes? So we're living in a world where we live better lives than the richest man of all time. Twice as rich as the Elon Musk's group did. And that's a pretty good thing. So we have a lot of reasons to be optimistic. Thank you very much.
I hope that was good.
Thank you for being here today. When we were getting started here, Ben's, when they were coming around for coffee, he commented he's naturally caffeinated. I think we can all see that now pretty clear. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the engaging presentation. We are off next week for the Easter holiday, but we will be back the following week. Looking forward to that great presentation. We've got Charlie Sloniker, who is the Chief Revenue Officer for the Philadelphia Union. We've got FIFA Cup coming this summer. It's going to be great. So until then, take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else too.